All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Right, thanks for everyone joining me here today. We're all ready to go. Just wanted to say thank you for joining us today to think about the data collection tool for the Night Shelter Network. I'm Jack Patel from Get the Data. I think I've met some of you, but maybe emailed some of you, but anyone I haven't met before. I'm director at Get the Data, specialise in helping organisations like yourselves think about what data they need to collect in order to show their impact and then thinking through the tool. The tool we're presenting today is something that actually colleague Mark Brennan, now as you know, the network coordinator, started off using in his shelter. So it's a tried and tested approach to collecting the sort of data that we're interested in. We used it last year, so there's been some tweaks, some updates since then. Also, we sort of have been able to learn what people find easy, difficult, hard. So that's what we're able to start addressing today, and got a better understanding of what people want to get from it overall. Here's the outline of what we're going to talk about today. So Mark's here and myself give you some background about why we're here today and what we're trying to achieve. We then want to talk through about how what analysis will be made available to you for entering data and sharing that data. We then go on to the practical tasks around entering data, how to add your own fields, because I know that's a particular question people are starting to have. How one can then review the results and start to return the data for the sharing process. So, that in mind, I will now start to the presentation. I think we got to about 12 o'clock, so I think we can cover it all within that time as well. So, Helping Justice for a while now, I've been wanting to collect more data about the shelter network and be able to understand more about all the good work that's going on. One of the reasons for that is in the current climate, being able to demonstrate what the network's contribution is to homelessness in London and wider and across the whole of England and Wales. That has become a very key question, and in order to be able to do that, data is a very key part. And once one has the data, you can then start to think about how you can influence how things are done locally, how you can get further funding, etc., as well as to be able to understand the internal improvements that are possible within your organisation. There have been a number of tasks completed about the data that needs to be collated up to now. The first thing was about a couple of years ago, I believe, a number of measures were defined by the network about what they thought was important to measure on the contribution that they're able to make. And that's been iterated and slightly updated over the last 2 years, but not much changes going on there. After the first year, when that data was sent back, one of the feedback and also in order to improve the data collection process was to provide a consistent and common data collection tool across the network. So that's one of the things being done. And also, the main reason that Housing Justice were keen for our involvement was to start thinking about how to feed analyses back to people. So it wasn't just about the process of you sharing data and not hearing anything back, but also you're able to start using those data and have the analyses available to you. Now we've got 1 year's of data that was compiled last year. This year we're hoping to improve upon that, so we can get even better data and really understand the contribution that's been able to be made. So our next part is really about, I wanted to start talking through about what you will get back when you do share data, and how you're able to use that information to you. So if I get up the first one. What we'll be able to provide you at the end of every month is the result answers to your golden questions, which will be in the tool, but we'll be able to clean up your data as well and expand upon that information a bit as well. So what we have here is the results to those questions from last year, so you'll be fed back this data in the same format as well. Now, one of the key things from here is there's a lot going on. So across 21 London shelters that provided information, sort of 83,000 hours of volunteer time, and that was equating to £1.1 million worth of equivalent value that might be able to be extrapolated from that. We saw that the numbers who were being moved on into housing, there was 256 across London and 491 across all the shelters that we were able to show, and that was from a number of guests of about 1,577, so about just under a third or so being able to be moved on. But I think one of the other things on this is, one of the other reasons why we're here and why it's important, that 1.1 million being able to know a third of being moved on, both very important statistics that start to show the contribution you're making. However, you'll be able to see in the notes that actually not all the shelters were able to provide that even within the 24, so we're actually understating what impact you're able to have if we're not getting all the data in. And again, I think feedback is on the moved in, and having known the data, that number probably is substantially underestimated as well. But we can only report back on the data that is shared, so one never gets it right first time. I've never seen that, but I start to use these data, I start to see what they're showing us, start to feed that back and get the culture going on why it's important to use this information, as well as start to think about how you can use this data yourself. Which leads me to the next bit of feedback that you'll be able to get. This is an example of the sort of information that you'll be able to get back, a very clear bit of information about what you've been giving back. This will actually come in an Excel tool where you'll be able to choose a particular field or issue that you want to look at, and up will come a chart that describes what you're doing, and we'll be able to compare that to all the shelters within the network. Here we're sharing it for London, but and you'll get the table and you'll get a chart, so that data becomes a lot more easily accessible, and you can start to use that in your own reports and funding applications, etc. And we have that for lots of different bits of information as well, as you can see here. Anything that's really been going into the tool, and that will be available in Excel, and you can just choose the thing that you're interested in having. We also have the other Excel tool, which we call the dashboard. Now this enables you to first here on the right hand side have a look at your data, so you can choose which area you're from. All areas are anonymized, so you can see how you're doing and how other areas are doing, and you can also see how all of London are doing as well. So also all of the network that have shared data in this process. But you're only able to see on the right hand side here what data has been shared and hasn't been shared, so that you're able to see where your gaps are and how you might be able to overcome those. Once I start to click on Start, we then get a bit more detailed information around the golden questions information. So here we're thinking about the inputs, outputs, outcomes that are set out in that. And first off on the dashboard we show the overall numbers. So we're able to think through the nights open, the volunteer hours. These are the main ones that we can look at, and the main issues that are probably coming out for different organisations. And then we're able to look at that, break those down in a bit more depth by having a look at outputs, for example, and to automatically updates what it's showing. So a bit more information. It's the same around the inputs, outputs, and outcomes, and that's what is made available to you to be able to use all the time. Because this is Excel, you can copy any of these charts, any of these figures, and put them into your own reports as well. In that way, you'll be able to start making use of these data as well. We also can look at things over time within the tool. So if I look here at the trends information, it's not really quite meaningful, the data we've got here at the moment, but you can see over the last 12 months what's been going on, and these trends will become a lot more significant as we start to get data over years and years and years, and then we can start to really understand the contribution of a great deal of depth over time and a lot of understanding of what the great, everyone knows what great work you're doing if you're involved within the shelter, but being able to communicate that becomes very important for the use of data. Hopefully that would have shown you what can come out at the end. And those tools will be made available to you monthly to look at those data. So as the data is shared monthly, that will come back to you. The next thing to look at is now to get on with the actual data entry process. I know a tool came to you a couple of weeks or a month ago from Mark. Got some good comments back on that to be able to iterate it to the next version. So that's one that I'm looking at today, and that will be made available to you, of course, by Mark. Now there is a guidance sheet that talks you through all the different elements of the tool and what it does for you and what data is put in each one. So this is a reference, so you can go back to that and just look around what each thing is about. But I'll go through each one and just make sure that we are doing the data in the right way. One of the key things, though, is this mark here about the fields that are mandatory. Based on the feedback from a couple of years ago, it was good to think through there's some data that would be nice to know, but there are some things that we think are mandatory and really quite key, so they're marked with the red star throughout the tool. Okay, so when starting with the tool, you first go to this tab number 1, the shelter facts. And this is a very key one, and this is about being able to just give some basic information about when you're open, what shift times are, and what your capacity is on any given day of the week. Very simple to enter the data. I will do it as if we were starting at the beginning of December. So first off, I put in the date that we're going to start. Now all dates need to go in this this format. Sometimes it might be people might want to do that, but actually Excel doesn't pick that up as a date. So one needs to put it in that way. And then I'll put in the second date, which is the end process, so December to March period for this particular example. Now this part is about being able to tell us your capacity. So on any given day of the week, what is capacity? That is the number of beds that are available in your shelter. Now judging by what was fed back last year, that generally is quite similar on each day. So if I put it in as 20, then that would come up here. Now there is an alternative way of also filling in the capacity, as we understand that that might vary from time to time. So some of you might have, say up to Christmas, a lower capacity than you do after Christmas. So looking at it in that way, I can put in as 2014 with an end date of say 22nd to allow for prices. Within that period, capacity might be 15. And then once crisis is over, it might be that you then have 20 beds available until the end of the period, and that could be put in like that. Now, it's good to then go to this guest attendance sheet just to make sure that what you put in is actually being picked up. Because as you can see here, I put it in from the 1st of December until the end of March. So we get a date in the guest attendance for each one. Also, if you look at the capacity, up to the 22nd of December, it's down as 15, then a 0 for a week or so, and then back up to 20 for the rest of the season. So that just tells me that the data has been entered correctly. Last year, I think people were having problems with this sheet because this one hadn't been completed. So that's one of the main checks that one needs to do. The last bit is to tell us about when your shifts for the shelter start and end. This is really important data to be able to understand the hours that are being contributed by your volunteers, from which we're able to then derive a value of what that might be. So we start by saying when the evening shift starts, so let's say 6:30 to 10. Then an overnight shift, which might last from 10 till 6. And the next one will be from 6 in the morning to 8:30. Now, this is the format that one needs to write in times within the Excel. Some people last time were writing it like this, so 6 p.m. Fortunately, that sometimes Excel can pick that up, as it did in this particular example, but other times it just goes in as text, and that meant that we're not able then to calculate within the tool the number of hours that are being contributed. So one of the key things is it's saying here, just keep that as hours and minutes and the style that you use. So that just needs to be done once at the beginning. It doesn't take very long, and then you're ready to start putting in the basic details about your guests. So this sheet, number 2, guests, 2A, guests, is where you can put in the details about who stays with you. And very simple, and as you can see, there's a number of ones that have the mandatory on. So I'll put simple myself, and I will say that I was referred on 1st of December 2012. I didn't mean to do that, but unfortunately one of the benefits of the tool shows I put in the completely wrong date there because of the period that I said that I'm working for. So that can't be right. So I need to go back into that and put that to 14. That wasn't even me. That was a genuine mistake on my behalf, rather than trying to show the functionality, but it shows that it works. I need to put in what my immediate accommodation rules, level of risk, what my birthday is, what gender is, male, UK, guest claiming benefits, number of different options here. This stands for no recourse to public funds, so I'll say no.
Sorry, can you do more over the nationality?
Oh yes, that was a good one. We have a little thing here that helps to tell you which of the EEA countries, so members of the EU plus Norway and Switzerland, or is it just Norway? One of the two. So that comes in as one of the options here. So you've got non-UK EEA and non-UK other. So anyone who's not on that list, not UK, go down with that one. And then I can put in my borough, and the basic idea is you can put in who the referrer was. So that's not mandatory information, but if you need a record of who that might have been, you can put it in there. So that one's complete. What then we also have is, as you can see here, because it's been put in, that my name now comes up on the next sheet, and you're able to then put in what my needs are as well. So all of the ones at the star that are generally named sort of yes, no, or don't know, so you can put that in for each person. Some of them are a little bit different. So one of question that was quite important was whether someone's being case managed. That can be by your shelter, whether you have a partner organisation that might do that for you, so that's external. Some organisations were having both. There's also thought to be important that sometimes it can be offered to a client, but they decide not to use that and take it up. So that's one of the options there. Continue along, and another one, but not mandatory, is understanding about whether this person's had any contact with the criminal justice system. We broke that into to be easier to fill in. So sometimes people might have a prison sentence or non-custodial or a non-custodial sentence that was managed by probation, or they could have actually be on that at the moment. So that would be the option here. At the end here, we also have the chain number. Again, this isn't mandatory, but one of the key issues is that by showing that you're working with people who are on chain, you show that shelter networks make a major contribution to homelessness in London to an extent. So that's quite important to be able to have that there. That's all the information that we're going about the guest. I just wondered, Mark, could you describe why these are the needs that are being, what's helpful about this information around the needs?
Yeah, it's standard stuff for the sector, basically. As much as possible, we're trying to be sort of aligned and in sync with the homelessness sector, and we've had some really good advice from Homeless Link in particular, and other agencies. And in terms of gathering the kind of data that is going to make sense to people and is synchronized with all the other data that is gathered, these were the essential needs that that we decided to include in here, which is pretty standard stuff. I think most people will agree it's pretty standard stuff, but at the same time you can get into much more complication, more detail about it, but we wanted to obviously keep this tool as simple as possible with their essentials that will give us the evidence that we really need to make an impression and understand exactly what the contribution of the network is to the sector.
The next tab was around referrals that are not given a bed. This wasn't considered to be mandatory information, but it's very helpful information in that if you're getting a lot of referrals that you can't then give a bed to, whether that's due to capacity reasons, quality reasons, or the issues of the inappropriateness of the referrals, then that can go in here. So I can put in basic information about that, what the date might have been, put it in at the beginning of December, and say not appropriate for the shelter. So there might be an inappropriate referral made there, and that's all that needs to go in there, and then that can be counted later on. Now, one of the main sheets is this one about guest attendance. This is really quite key, and it's being able to fill this in not only gives a good record of what was being occupied every night and for yourselves around capacity and being able to monitor that. It also is a very key factor in being able to show what contribution, so number of guests, but then to show how long they stay for. It's very, very important to show the benefit of the work that you're doing. So all that needs to be done is say again, my name turns up, so they stayed on the 1st of December, and I'm going to be able to drop down. Now, I know it looks a bit strange, and we've got this U with the layout over it. That's just due to a limitation in Excel, in that the font that then has that as a tick, as a saying yes, they stayed, can only be shown as the proper text in the drop-down box. So that hasn't really been done for any particular reason other than a limitation in Excel. But we just thought the tick, once it's in, it's quite clear and a useful way of doing things. So now I'm in, as you can see, it's now saying that one bed was occupied that night, and that's an occupancy rate of 7%. It's now also telling me that I've stayed for one night in total. What I can then do is just copy that so that I can show, I can go along and pull it all in for all of them, or I can do something like this. That wouldn't work. I'll say my capacity is 0. So now it's showing that I've got 22 nights in the shelter, and each of those nights it's gone for 1. Obviously, when once more are filled in, then this will fill up, which will be showing you in a moment. So that's how one puts in the data for guest attendance, and that just goes up over time and then scroll across to the other days. So another key bit of information, and it's really around that one, being able to show the input and all the work that goes on by the volunteers. It's here, and how this one works is all the different shifts that we put in the dates for. We don't just say how many volunteers are working on that shift, and also understand some other shift volunteers might do something around those shifts as well, so we have to put that information in as well. So based upon the nights that I put in as being open, they turn up here. So I've already got 1st of December in. So I can say, let's say on the evening shift I had 3 volunteers, the overnight shift 2, 3 again at the breakfast, and then 1 was helping with some bed linen or something like that. And that comes out of a total of 9 for that period. What this one here is, and it's not the mandatory, but feedback suggests that some guests don't come for a bed, but do come for food. So you're able to enter that information here to say if we have 3 on that particular evening. And that's all complete now, and about how to fill in that information. Now the final one is really about outcomes that are achieved. This is a very key one as well, particularly on the move on accommodation, hence why it's got the red star next to it. Again, this is really about being able to show that people what you're able to achieve for them, what the outcomes are, which is a very key message to be able to put out, that staying at a shelter, you're able to make contact, engage, and move that on. Many different options here. These very much reflect what the sector thinks about when someone moves from the shelter into another situation. And some of these are positive, some of them might be negative, such as going into custody. And I'll be able to enter the date that's achieved for that individual. Though it's not mandatory, we can also think about employment. So did they achieve part-time, full-time payment, or if they were already in employment, they did that for 28 days or more, or none, didn't say. It's the same with, were they able to start any kind of training or education course while they're with you. So that's it for data entry. What we then get to see is, which I'll show in more detail, is some of the analysis that we need to come back to around that. So we've got the demographics and support needs of your clients, and here's the golden questions as well, based upon the information that I entered. So even by what I put in just for one night, we see that that was actually 35 hours of total volunteers, and you're going to be open for 121 nights, which equals just a bit over 2,000 bed nights. And well, I've only got one in, so 22 of those are filled. But we're already starting to generate that information, which is very helpful to this process. Okay. Now, on to the next part, which is starting to think about how to add your own fields to this tool. What one of the feedback we've had is that people would like to use the tool but aren't able to put in all the information they need for their own purposes, or what a local funder or local authority would like from that data. So what we're able to do is you can put in your own fields, but I just want to show you the process of doing that, so that when it comes to sharing the data, we have automated processes for taking these data out of the tool, and if one makes a change in a certain way, it can cause problems on that. So I just want to show how that works. So On this, I'll do it on the guest sheet, but it applies to any other sheets that you have. What you can see, this is Excel 2010. So what you have at the top is a button called Review, and you'll see one called Unprotect Sheet. I believe that if you have 2003 and before, there'll be a label up here called Tools, and on that, under that there'll be an option called Protection, where you can find this. Now first off, I need to unprotect my sheet, so I'm able to start making changes to it. We protected it so that it is possible to make unexpected changes without knowing it to the sheet, so we protect it. But so data unprotected in this instance. I then need to look at the view and get my headings in. Again, clicking on view, going to headings. I think in Excel 2003 there's an option again up here called view. Underneath that there's an option about heading and headings. Now then what I need to do is go to the N column, right click on that, and I'll get the option to insert. This is the same on any version of Excel. And then what you'll see is by doing that, another column turns up where I'm able to just start entering information. So if I wanted to say ethnicity, or there's one particular option could be to go in, and then I can start putting that in there for the individual. Now it needs to go, the extra fields need to go far to the right of this table that you've got for data entry. The reason is that if, say, I could put one in here, but then that would then change how the data starts to come out at our end, and that will cause us problems and have to start coming back to you and asking to change things. So we don't want that, so that's why it's okay to put it in here, but anywhere else would cause a problem. We then go to and put the headings back off, just so we can keep them on, but just a bit neater without those. I then want to go back to Review to protect the sheet. I don't want to put a password on it, and just the default options are okay. So that's now defaulted, so I can't make changes, to this bit apart from where the data entry in yellow is possible. In that way, it becomes a lot. And you can now continue with the extra bit of information you wanted to add. The next thing I wanted to start showing was reviewing the results or making changes to it once you've got a lot of data in the tool. Now, we've got some dummy data that we collected from last year for this purpose. So here we are. We have a shelter that started in January and ended in March with a capacity of 15, and here are the times which it opens. We have lots of data about guests. Obviously it's been anonymised, we'll talk a bit more about it at the end about returning data. And then with a lot of information about where the referral dates, etc. and so on. And you can just see what it looks like all filled in. If there are any gaps you don't know, that's not a huge issue. It's better to say you don't know if there is a gap, but if it is a gap there, don't know, then you're able to pick that up. We then have a good number of referrals, why they weren't able to be picked up. And here's what the guest attendance looks like. So for each of my ones now, you can see how many days they were there for and what the capacity was on each night. As you can see here, in this particular example, it's the over capacity, a good number of nights. So there might be an argument there for either the increasing capacity or finding how to refer to other shelters if they're under capacity, etc. In order to improve the experience. We then look at the number of volunteer shifts, so lots of data put in there again, about how many people are helping out, lots on the evening shifts, lots on a few overnight, breakfast shift, and then we have the total across all of those. Now, and the outcomes in this particular example, because it's mandatory, they filled in what the outcomes were for different people. We'll move on to what I think is Interestingly, then we can then start seeing the numbers and how things start to break down on this sheet. So, for instance, 71 male, 10 female, and 0. You might be able to look at this data, so that's a total of 81. You might be able to look at this data and think, hang on, I put in more than that, which can sometimes happen. So if I leave that out, you'll see that this now goes down to 78. So if you see anything like that, you know that you've got some missing data, and you can go back in there and put that back in. I don't think that was correct. So now we're back up to 81 up here. So that's also a way of checking whether you've got all your data in or not. We can then look at the golden questions. Obviously, a lot more information. So we've got 7,000 volunteer hours were recorded in there in just 90 days. Here we got the number of beds filled, number of bed nights. So obviously this overall was under over capacity, as we can see here for the whole period. One of the things is number of guests that were housed. So 11, that was done within 28 days. So this one lets us know whether they're housed within the shelter period, during the season, and then whether that was done within 4 weeks, which for some of you might be a key indicator that you have with local stakeholders. So that's the main bits of analysis that comes out of it. We've covered all that we need to think about on data entry. Actually, there was one other thing I wanted to show, which was some of you have wanted to either copy from other sheets or if you sent an update and you need to put in a new one, how that might work. It is very straightforward, and it is as simple as I will highlight all these data that are in this one. I'll then copy that. I'll hit right click and go copy. Other ways in 2010 you can copy here, and for 2003 and before it would edit, copy. So that's now chosen that data and I've copied it. If I go to line, say this is the new version, I just go to the top left of where that needs to go in, paste it as values, right anyway, and all that data is now in, so that's it. And I will get all the information up here about genders and etc. coming up, so it's as easy as that. Other ways of copying, one can do right click and paste, or you can go up here and do your paste as well. That just goes back in again. I think 2003 and before it was edit, paste, is the way of doing it. So if you do find yourself in that situation, it is a very straightforward thing to do. And yeah. So the final thing is about being able to return these data. So this process that one needs to go through to do that. The main thing here is that first off, I need to anonymize these data before I send them back to Housing Justice. So just to do that, I will take out all the names, like so, just leave them blank, that's fine. If I look at the other place where names can be is on referrals not given a bed, so I will delete that out as well. The other thing that needs to be anonymized is if you have been entering the chain number, that if there is a number in there for your own records, then that needs to turn to yes, like this. Now, before you start any of that anonymizing process, one really should make a copy of the file, which I am doing here. So I will call this copy like this. Now what I also need to do before sending this on is to put a password on the file as well. And Now to do that, both in any version of Excel, when you go to Save, you'll see something called Tools. There's one called General Options within that. Now this will then give me the option to put a password on that file. So I'll put one in, like this. Hit OK. It'll then ask me to confirm what that is. And they'll let me save a copy. That's now done. I have a copy saved. I'll see how that works when I go to there we go, dummy. And as it opens now, it will. That's just the way putting a password on it so that one can then email it to Health and Justice with confidence that it's properly protected. The actual process there works, as I say here, set out the steps that one needs to take. First, make a copy of the file, anonymize the names and the chain numbers that were in there, add a password, and Alex is the new Natasha, I understand, and we would send it to what man or woman?
Alex is a man. Alex Bison. Yeah.
Alex Bison, and he will collate all the information together, just double check that it's been properly anonymized before we start to process those data, and we'll come back to any particular issues. When you share a password, the best process is actually to send the password in protected file by email to Alex, and then ring him up with what the actual password is, rather than stating the password in the same email, which was something that we had to feedback on last time. So that's not an appropriate way of doing it. And that is all of the that I wanted to say. The next steps on this is really around how we start to work together on all this. As we go forward, if you have any issues, if you have any questions, of course we're able to respond to those. Process used last year, which worked well, and as Mark is a new pool. If you have any queries, questions, first email those to Mark, who's taking the lead on this work for Health and Justice, and if it's something that I can respond to, he will contact me on your behalf, and I'll probably make contact with you directly, but sometimes there might be stuff that he can, over time, he will just learn what is the right response to that, and probably more quickly respond to what your needs are on that. And what would happen when returning data is at the end of the month, you go through that process, returning data, it comes through, and with about 10 working days later, you start to get back the analysis that I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. That's all I wanted to go through. That's everything. I think probably got questions during that period, so we can start to address those now.
Okay, thank you. There are a couple of questions with regards to the guest needs tab.
Yeah.
Firstly, should they only answer yes for mental health issues that have been diagnosed, or can they also indicate ones that are suspected?
Show me the drop down again.
We just have a yes, no.
No, we've got a question mark there, haven't we? Yes, no, and question mark under each of the needs under mental health.
Yeah.
You see yes, no, question mark. So if where you've suspected, just put a question mark.
Okay, thank you. And with regards to physical health, what level of issue are you looking for?
Physical health, well, anything that people need some medical attention for. So right through from A&E, you know, emergency, right through to foot problems, you know, anything that anyone would go to a doctor for.
Okay.
That guests, very often you'll find that people aren't going to the doctor for. And, you know, that's a particularly hot topic at the moment, actually. There's a symposium coming up in the Midlands all about health, and this is the third symposium, and out of the previous symposium, some outreach funding was provided to agencies like Great Chapel Street Centre and Greenlight Medical Van to actually go out into the shelters and help folks with their medical needs. And it's really important because we want to prevent folks, we want to get people to get early intervention on their physical issues and mental for that matter, but physical as well, so that it doesn't become a crisis and people go into costly A&E admission, experiences. So yeah, anything that anyone would go to a doctor for,
Okay.
or a nurse, yeah, or a clinic.
Okay, great. A question with regards to the golden questions. Could you explain the emphasis on move on within 28 days?
I'll answer. I don't think there is a total emphasis upon that. Hence why we've got it for the season and the 28 days. There was some feedback a year ago that some people actually measured on that locally, like stakeholders. That's something we put in, and there was a debate about whether to have 28 days or by the end of the season. So we've got both in.
Okay.
So there isn't a preference from Health and Justice. It was more people wanted to see both.
Okay, fine. A question with regards to the immediate previous accommodation. Apparently there's some confusion last year about the categories. Could you specify what each of them mean?
Sure.
I don't know if that's possible to do it verbally or they say in an email if not.
Right. So there are sort of an essential three categories that the sector uses, and they are people living on the street, people new to the street, and returners, which are reflected there. But there's a couple of additional options, one being one night, and this is all to do with funding. This, you know, a requirement from the funders that we require. I realise that it's made it a little more confusing, and my preference was to keep it to just the three options, but because of the funding issue, we've been required to add these. So, so one night on the street is that if you know that the person just spent the previous night, that first night on the street, the previous night before they came into the shelter, then just indicate that, which won't often be the case, I would imagine. The essential things are, is this somebody that's been living on the street? Is this someone that isn't on chain? When you say new to the street, it's someone that's not on the chain database, and the return to the street are folks have been on the street, are on the chain database, have been in accommodation, and are back on the street. So the other things, obviously there's some folks aren't going to answer for you, so that's why we added the didn't, won't say. And then you've got to consider hidden homeless. Hidden homeless are all those folks that are precariously housed, under threat of eviction, at risk of abandonment, in overcrowded situations, domestic violence situations, who find the situation unbearable, so and decide to actually go out on the street. But if they manage to arrive in your shelter, then this is a case of, but for your shelter being there, they would otherwise be rough sleeping, and that's an important that we found. That was a quite important one to distinguish.
Yeah.
So I hope that explains those options.
Great, thank you. Jack, you talked about adding an additional column to tab. Is it possible to add an additional sheet, and if so, where on the spreadsheet should it go?
Yes, and you can put it anywhere. Doesn't really matter. So if any way that any extra sheet you can just do in your way, and it doesn't matter whereabouts it is in that list of anything.
Okay.
What I would say is please do not change the names of the sheets.
Okay.
That's what someone did last time, and that causes us problems if that's done. But when it comes to putting your own sheet in, you can call it what you want, you can put it where you want, do whatever you want with it.
Great. Question with regards to risk. Are there any set criteria related to the level of risk?
There is. We've actually created a point system, and I don't think we're going to have the time to get into that today. But we will have this webinar available on the Housing Justice website for everybody to look back on, and we will be able to provide the risk point system that we created for you to determine whether it's red, amber or green.
Okay, lovely. A question with regards to rehousing categories. Is there now a housing association option? If not, which category should they put that into, because it's not really private or council housing?
Yeah, is there something about, let me see, can you scroll down? So I scroll up yeah, see, I would put that, I'd put it in other. I'd put it in other. Yeah. Oh, yeah, at the bottom. I'd put it in other. Good point. Thanks for the question.
Okay.
It might be something that we know we should probably add to the options.
Yeah.
We'll have to give some more thought to that. A lot of thoughts were already put into these options, but we didn't want to make it any more. And obviously, there's all kinds of things you can put in there, and that might be something that we ought to add. But for now, if you put it in other, that would be the way to go.
Okay, great. Finally, can you give an example of the impact that using this data has had?
Well, I can tell you that this afternoon at 4 o'clock I'll be going down to the House of Commons for the parliamentary launch of the Housing Justice Quality Mark, and part of that presentation we'll be making is about data collection and our impact report. For me, I would have loved to have the kind of quality of data that would be so incredibly impressive for an event like that. You can imagine. The unfortunate reality is that there's a lot of gaps, there's a lot of missing data, which I don't want to, I can totally understand, capacity reasons for projects, and especially startup projects and things. It's a real challenge. So I do appreciate that, I've been there. But the idea is that we can, with your help, we can gather enough data that impact report will be complete and accurate, and it will make a huge impression. I mean, one of the things, the standout things that you'll find if you've already had the opportunity to read the impact report is those volunteer hours, over £1.5 million worth. That's a big, that'll get a lot of attention. But we want to be able to demonstrate to people, debunk the myths as it indicates in the report, and this data will help do that. So these are the kind of events that Housing Justice are invited along to, the various symposiums and events where decision makers are, people of influence, statutory folks, the wider sector. So, we really want to be able to say to anybody and everybody, and for people to understand what contribution you are all making to the sector as a whole, which is huge, absolutely huge. I hope you can all see that. But we really need to capture it and demonstrate it.
I'll just add that on a more local level, I probably haven't told this to the market, but over the summer, I live in Waltham Forest, and I know one of the trustees there for personal reasons, and I sat down with her with their data that they've been filling in, and gave her the outputs and how those charts, etc., could be put into their local funding bid to Waltham Forest Council. So that's a very direct benefit that was achieved for them by the staff taking the time to sit down and put all this information together.
Great, thank you. Come to the end of the questions.
Okay.
So I hope that was useful. Recording of the presentation will be available on the Housing Justice website, and we can circulate the link later on today. Okay, thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.